Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to present this paper. My name is Konstantinos Fragkotsinos, and I am an occupational therapist, PhD student from Greece. Today, I will present you a paper with title From Play to Participation, Inclusive Civic Learning in Public Spaces. Public playgrounds are often among the first shared public spaces that children encounter regularly in everyday life. They are usually treated as ordinary places of leisure, recreation, and physical activity. Yet, recent research suggests that playgrounds are much more than that. They are spaces where children experience not only movement and play, but also access and restriction, participation and marginalization, social interaction, and social distance. In this sense, they are not only recreational environments, they are also places where public life is encountered in early and embodied ways. In this presentation, we argue that public playgrounds and other non-school public environments can be understood as formative sites of everyday citizenship. They are spaces where children encounter participation, negotiation, recognition, and exclusion in spatially situated and embodied forms. This paper is a conceptual and theoretical contribution based on a critical synthesis of relevant literature. It does not present primary empirical findings. Rather, it proposes an integrative framework for understanding how informal public spaces shape children's civic agency. The starting point of the paper is a gap in citizenship education research. Citizenship education has been predominantly conceptualized within formal school settings. That tradition has been important, but it has also narrowed where we expect civic learning to happen. If citizenship is examined mainly through curriculum, classroom discussion, and institutional schooling, then we risk overlooking the civic significance of ordinary public environments in the children's everyday lives. This is where public pedagogy becomes especially useful. Research in public pedagogy has emphasized that learning does not happen only within formal education institutions. Non-school, informal and public spaces can also serve as sites of learning, belonging and social formation. Public parks, squares, libraries, museums and other public sites can operate as meaningful pedagogical environments because they expose children to norms, relationships and ways of inhabiting public life beyond the classroom. This broader perspective matters because public spaces do not simply host activity, they also organize it. They shape who feels entitled to enter, who remains at the margins, who is recognized, and who is implicitly treated as an outsider. Research on spatial justice in public open space planning is particularly relevant here. It shows that the question is not only whether public space exists, but whether it is equitably accessible, socially inclusive, and aligned with broader claims to justice and the right to the city. In other words, public space is always also a question of recognition, distribution, and participation. Within this wider discussion, playgrounds deserve particular attention. Literature on public playgrounds and inclusive play now shows quite clearly that playgrounds are not only neutral settings. On the one hand, they can be important places for children's development, social interaction, and participation. On the other hand, both physical and non-physical conditions can reproduce marginalization and exclusion. Researchers have shown that public playgrounds can create barriers through inadequate access, limited play value, restricted opportunities for interaction, and weak policy support. Some scholars therefore describe playgrounds design not simply as a technical matter, but as part of what has been called the architecture of social participation. This is one reason why we propose to understand playgrounds as civic ecologies. By this, I mean that playgrounds should not be reduced to equipment or layout alone. They are socio-material environments composed of physical design, accessibility, implicit rules of interaction, adult mediation practices, peer cultures, and municipal governance structures. These elements do not operate separately, they interact. Together, they shape what kinds of participation become possible, visible, difficult, or denied. This point is threatened by a human ecology perspective. In the book Understanding Human Ecology, Dibal and Newell describe human ecology as a way of examining how social and ecological conditions interact, and they frame it around a deceptively simple question: why we do what we do and what we achieve doing this act. They also insist that issues of sustainability are inseparable from issues of justice and fairness. That way of thinking is highly relevant here. It helps us move away from viewing inclusion as an attribute of the child and toward understanding it as something produced through the interaction of people, environments, norms, institutions, and material arrangements. Seen from this angle, inclusion is not simply a personal disposition or a social skill. It is an emergent property of socio-material systems. This becomes especially clear in studies of inclusive playgrounds. Some qualitative research shows that even when playgrounds are physically more accessible and children describe the equipment as enjoyable and usable, inclusion is still not guaranteed. Children may encounter what researchers call invisible barriers, social, attitudinal, and spatial forms of separation that persist even within supposedly inclusive environments. Belonging may become divided into we and them. Children may know very well where they are expected to stay, with whom they are expected to interact, and which parts of the playground feel socially available to them. This is a crucial insight into the argument of this paper. It suggests that material accessibility, while foundational, is not sufficient. Physical design matters deeply, but it cannot by itself produce inclusion if the social environment continues to sustain separation, insecurity, or symbolic exclusion. Research on inclusive playgrounds therefore points us toward a more relational understanding of participation, one that sees the physical, attitudinal, social, and even political environments as constantly interactive. Based on this synthesis, the paper identifies four interrelated conditions that support inclusive civic learning in public playgrounds. The first condition is material accessibility and spatial design that supports diverse participation. This means more than technical compliance or physical entry. It means environments that genuinely allow children with different interests, capacities, and ways of engaging to participate meaningfully in shared activity. Public playgrounds research supports this strongly by showing that inaccessible or poorly designed environments can limit not only movement but also play value and social participation. The second condition is symbolic recognition and the right to presence in shared spaces. Children need not only to be present in a public space, but to be recognized as legitimate participants in it. Spatial justice literature is useful here because it reminds us that justice in public space involves more than distribution. It also involves inclusion, social visibility, and the right to occupy said space without being treated as secondary or problematic. The third condition refers to the opportunities for rule negotiation and collaborative meaning-making. Everyday citizenship is not only about following pre-existing rules. It is also about learning how shared life is negotiated. In playgrounds, this may happen through small acts, taking turns, resolving conflict, adapting games, negotiating use of equipment, and responding to difference. These moments may appear ordinary, but they matter because they are early experience of participation in shared public life. The fourth condition focuses on the supportive adult and institutional mediation that legitimizes children's voices. Adult presence and institutional decisions shape the conditions under which participation becomes possible. Research on children's participation and child-friendly urban thinking has emphasized that public environments are shaped not only by design, but also by governance, rights, and adult priorities. Likewise, public pedagogy research shows that adults can intentionally use public sites as environments that support belonging, agency, and participation beyond the school. This matters because children's voices do not become legitimate automatically. They are enabled, constrained, or ignored through mediation. Taken together, these four conditions suggest that inclusive civil learning in playgrounds is relational, ecological, and systemic. It is not achieved simply by placing diverse children in the same setting. Co-presence does not guarantee participation, accessibility does not guarantee recognition, and design does not guarantee belonging. A more adequate account must examine how material conditions, symbolic meanings, social interactions, and institutional arrangements come together in the everyday life of public space. Similarly, in the Greek context, this discussion is especially relevant. Public playgrounds are familiar neighborhood spaces of everyday gathering and public life. Yet, they are not often discussed as civic environments in which children encounter participation, exclusion, recognition, or shared presence. Public discussion tends to focus more on safety, compliance, renovation, and access than on the broader civic and pedagogical significance of these spaces. This does not make those concerns unimportant, but it does mean that a wider conceptual language is still needed. The implications of this framework are therefore broader than playground design alone. For citizenship education, the paper argues that civic formation should be examined beyond the classroom. If children encounter public life in embodied and spatially organized ways outside school, that citizenship education must take those spaces seriously. For municipalities and planners, the paper suggests that playgrounds should not be viewed only as technical installation or leisure amenities. They can also be understood as civic ecologies that shape belonging, participation, and recognition. For educators, parents, and community stakeholders, the framework offers a way to think differently about children in public space. Children are not merely users of playgrounds. They are participants in everyday public life. To conclude, this paper proposes that public playgrounds are not simply places for recreation. They are places where children encounter the possibilities and limits of participation, where inclusion is negotiated rather than assumed, and where the meanings of presence, belonging, and shared life begin to take public form. By bringing together all these terms, we argue for a broader understanding of civic learning, one that recognizes that public life is not first encountered only in institutions, but also in the ordinary spaces of the city. Seen this way, playgrounds are not only where children play, they are where civic life is quietly practiced, where belonging is tested, and where democratic inclusion may begin. Thank you very much for your attention.